welcome everyone to our World Workplace Wellbeing Summit session on understanding employee well-being, asking the right questions first. Since its inception, the Global Wellness Institute has promoted wellness across a variety of industries, supplying evidence-based wellness resources across the globe for more than 20 years. With the World Workplace Wellbeing Summit, we've gathered the finest thought leaders, influencers, broadening the Global Wellness Institute's deep reach into the topic of workplace well-being. Today, I am thrilled to welcome our experts, Rachael Griggs and Paul Griggs. So for Rachael, for 25 years, she has been creating holistic and sustainable event experiences, motivating people to be the best versions of themselves while caring for the environment. As general manager, environmental strategy, and the subject matter expert on well-being design, Riggs is responsible for Merit's LLC corporate responsibility, sustainability, ESG reporting, and compliance. Additionally, Riggs co-created a carbon footprint measurement tool that measures the footprint of an event. With this tool, Riggs works with clients to provide design insights to lessen the impact of an event. She also works with clients to design event experiences that care for the whole person so they can perform at their peak. Paul is a registered clinical counselor who specializes in workplace mental health for leadership, management, people, and cultural professionals and employees. Prior to clinical counseling, he worked in executive leadership positions for over 20 years as both a founder and CEO of a private startup and as vice president for a publicly traded company with global revenues of $7 billion and over 11,000 employees. Paul holds a Master of Counseling Psychology from City University of Seattle. Please welcome Paul and Rachael.
Okay, hi there. Got to get off mute. Thank you, everybody. Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Rachael.
Nice to see you.
Nice to
Thanks
see you
for
too.
being here. We're very excited to have this conversation. It's being recorded, so it will be shared with lots of people after this event. So
Cool.
just wanted to tell a little bit people about how did I get involved in this. So I work for a company called Merit's. We're based in St. Louis. And I have really worked on a lot of different things in the association, corporate worlds, and really very passionate about bringing events and sustainability as well as well-being together. Created this framework here called the 5 Dimensions of Well-being for Merit's, and really how we design events as well as how we lean into just our company in general. So we see the 5 dimensions of well-being. One we're going to talk about today is personal well-being, and it could relate to career well-being, financial well-being. I really focus on environmental well-being right now in my role, and social well-being is caring for others. So this is something that I always anchor on as a framework to bring people into the thinking about well-being. For me, it's not just about your physical health, and it's about all aspects of your life. What I do, this is right now, as I'm the environmental strategy lead for Merit's, we do our climate and impact report every year, and it's about the well-being of our company from all those 5 dimensions. If you want to look at this document, it's our 2023 climate and impact report. You can scan this QR code. My contact information, reach out to me via LinkedIn is here. We'll get started. So Paul, can you tell me a little bit about your background and what the journey was? Or tell me about your background and the journey that led you to establish Q2 Wellness. Super excited. Workplace wellness.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I just love those 5 dimensions, by the way. I think they're fabulous. They're really good.
Thank you.
So my journey, respecting where we are in time, started out in workplace. So sort of working for organizations. And then I had my own company, private company that in the events and convention industry. And then I sort of exited that. And then I think, as Sylvia was saying, as a VP for a really big company as well. But then I decided to shift careers into counseling, which may seem a bit radical, but it really followed some work I was doing in coaching and supporting people in the workplace. And yeah, I just found I really enjoyed getting a little bit deeper, how people were doing, how they were thriving, where they were suffering, and that sort of thing. So I'm a registered clinical counselor now with a private practice, as well as as you mentioned, the founder of this organization as well. And the reasons I think why this organization evolved was, in a big way, based on the interactions I was having with clients. These are clients that were coming to me for support, and a lot of it around workplace, a lot of it around workplace struggles, inability to continue coping. And so I would work with them one-on-one, but it was disheartening because I just kept thinking, gosh, if the leaders or the owners of companies knew how their employees were suffering, they could do something about it. And that really sort of began the idea of how do we help leaders understand how their employees are managing, coping, thriving, or suffering from a mental health perspective. And so that's kind of that's sort of our goal is to how do we bring this, honestly, the information, the insights to the organization in a confidential and safe way. Yeah, we can get into a bit more about sort of the philosophy behind sort of employee well-being and sort of organizational structures. But yeah, that's kind of sort of how it all began. That's how I ended up
I love
here.
that.
Yeah.
And that's how Paul and I have known each other over the years. Is he was in the events industry, and we've always been connected in the industry. And then I was intrigued by, given my passion around well-being, intrigued by what he started doing and pivoting. COVID was a big time in the events industry where everything stopped. And so Paul and I have always been good friends and followed him, and seeing this path, it's been quite special to see and honored to see it, because I think what you're working on and what you're doing for leaders to understand the mental health, especially after COVID and what we all experienced, is pretty remarkable. So having said that, considering today's mental health crisis, what strategies do you believe organizational leaders can implement to effectively support the mental health at their employees? I think we should go into this, maybe big picture.
Sure.
Let's look at this.
That's a great kind of place to start. This is a mental health model that we follow, and it really talks about the importance of the beginning is measuring. And so in a sort of in a way to answer the question as well, is I think organizations, leaders, department heads, managers, not just need to better understand employee mental health, but there's an opportunity. And I think, from my experience anyway, there's that sense of responsibility that leaders, organizations may feel they have. And while that's true, I think there is increasing responsibility, including, legal responsibilities for psychological health and safety. It's for me, less about the responsibilities and more about the opportunities. Most of us know that a healthy workforce, mentally healthy workforce is good for business. But most of us don't know how mentally healthy our workforces are. And so we use the term measure. It's really getting insight to employees' mental health. Does the organization have an issue with stress, burnout, anxiety, loneliness, which is really important, more important these days with our hybrid and remote workers, the impact of loneliness. I think the 2024 Gallup report, I think it was 2024, suggests that 20% of global employees are suffering from loneliness. Suffering is my word that I put in there, but loneliness is an important element of mental health. How do we know if our employees are lonely? To what degree are they lonely? And the only way to know is to ask.
Right.
And we think a good way to ask is through sort of validated, reliable measurements, which are assessments or surveys. Yeah,
You want to
I
explain
think
a
I'm
little
way off
bit
track.
more about this?
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk
sure.
about this model, because I think that it's asking the right questions is what we're talking about. Measuring,
Mhm.
to you, that's measuring and asking the right questions. But talk about this, because I really like this mental health model and how it affects the workplace and the well-being of the employee.
Sure, sure. So specifically with measurement, it's a shift away from employee engagement surveys or pulse surveys that organizations have, which are helpful and important. These are specific, validated assessments for mental health. This is the core of it. I mean, this is at the end of the day, they are validated assessments that GPs, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors use. So that's our measurement tool. That's our baseline. So we can look at stress for an example. We'll do a validated assessment for stress. So, okay, now the organizations can get a feel for how, in this case, stressed their team is. But what is often missing is how does that show up in the workplace? How does an individual who is severely or moderately stressed show up in the workplace? This is the behavior or insights. This is the term I use where the rubber hits the road. This is how employees react and with each other. And so we can get into maybe some of those, but maybe I'll just kind of go around the wheel sort of quickly.
Yeah, yes, please.
So how does the behavior then of the employee affect the business productivity? So for example, we know that sort of intuitively highly stressed employees will affect business productivity. How? It's because the way they behave. How does someone who's very stressed behave at work? How does that affect business productivity? Then, importantly, what workplace factors are contributing to employee stress? What is the workplace doing or not doing that has a direct connection to employee stress? Then going to that other pie section, employee factors, what can the employee do? Thank you. What can the employee do to affect their own stress? So it's really important to acknowledge that the workplace has a responsibility and opportunity to impact employee stress. But the employee also has, I believe, an opportunity or maybe responsibility, but an opportunity to lower their own stress, to change their relationship with stress. This is the work I do all the time in private practice for counseling. Together, if the organization ensures that the workplace factors are lowering stress or not increasing stress, and the employee does their work, then I think we have positive employee outcome, meaning individual lowering of stress, in this case, stress, and then of course the improved business outcome as well. All measurable. And and that's what I think is important, is that we're, really giving leadership data, that they can assess the effectiveness of the work that they're doing to directly impact employee mental health.
I think that's amazing. One of the things that I know in my workplace well-being work that I've done, people are always like, "Oh, yay, we have these pulse surveys," and that gives a read of what's happening. But what I like about this and what you're doing, you're going directly to the employees. It's anonymous, and it's giving a barometer so that people can understand. And whereas in a pulse survey, a lot of times people are like, well, they just want to hear what they want to hear, right? I'll answer it this way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a great point. Pulse surveys are important, or just any sort of engagement survey is important for organizations. What pulse surveys do, and so I'll get it wrong because I'm not from an HR background, but they generally ask, how do you feel about your work? How do you feel about your responsibilities? How do you feel about your manager? How do you feel about your experience at work? How's it going? And that's really important. What we're interested in is, how are you feeling about yourself? How are you doing? How are you coping? Because we acknowledge that stress, for example, doesn't just originate in the workplace. Stress, can originate at home. Mental health doesn't understand the difference between workplace stress and home stress. We just are experiencing stress and we become stressed. And so when we ask an employee or a person, ask them, how are they coping? How are they managing? Regardless of the role that workplace contributes to that, this is personal mental health. And this is what's a little bit different. We're really asking, how are you managing, with loneliness, stress, anxiety, depression, these sort of key areas. We also ask them qualifying questions in terms of, what role does the workplace have in contributing to this? What's your, thinking of that? So we get a sense of how our employees are doing, what role we might play as an organization to that, and what role sort of life outside of work plays a role in that.
I love that.
Yeah, that was maybe, does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about this slide real quick? Or did we touch on this?
I mean, we did, in a sense that, here's my thinking, is that at some time ago, organizations, as part of it, felt that employee mental health is really up to the employee. We don't really want to know too much about it. We don't really want to get engaged too much with it, with your individual mental health. We'll provide EAP programs, insurance, ways for you to engage, to make improvements, but we really didn't want to get too engaged in it ourselves. It really felt it wasn't our responsibility. And we may not have the tools as well. Then there was a shift, more recently, where the organization is sort of seen as quite responsible for employee mental health. In fact, in some ways, it's entirely responsible for employee mental health. And I gently challenge that as well, that it's tough for an organization to have full influence on employee mental health, on a person's mental health. They could be providing the most safe, secure, predictable work environment for an employee, and they can still be suffering through conditions outside of work. It's a combined effort. What the organization wants to do is make sure they're doing whatever they can to provide safe spaces, to remove any barriers towards employee mental health. And then the employee also needs to get a better understanding of their own mental health. And so
Absolutely.
this Venn diagram sort of shows that that's how we play. That's where we play, is right in the beginning, right in the middle. We want to help employees individually better understand their own mental health, and help organizations better understand their employees' mental health and then make changes. Yeah.
Sure. I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the stress survey example and
Sure.
walk us through this here, if you don't mind.
Sure. So what you're seeing now is the results. So we sort of moved ahead. What we've, in this case, the organization would have asked us to provide a stress survey for their team or entire organization. And we would have asked each employee to answer a series of questions. It takes 2 minutes to maybe 4 minutes to answer the questions. Each employee gets their
online,
own,
right?
It's all
online.
Yes, exactly. It's all online and all entirely anonymous. There's no connection to who the employee is, other than they're responding to a survey from the organization, just so we know that it's a person in the organization, but that's all we know. And so they get their individual stress score, which is helpful for them to understand where they are on the stress scale. In this case, you get scores between 0 and 42. And these are validated stress surveys that, like I said, GPs or psychologists use. And then the organization gets some results, some anonymous and confidential results. In this case, the organizational stress score is 19.45, which puts us into the mild stress category. When you work with us, we'll actually dig into this a little bit more to understand the spread as well. So while in this case, the organization has sort of a mild stress score, what is important for me is the range. How many of our people are in the extremely severe or even moderate stress? And so this graph down the bottom left shows that 1 in 5 employees, or 20%, are reporting moderate, severe, or extremely severe stress.
So this is all anonymous,
and
and it can go directly to leaders.
Yes, exactly. And sort of just one little correction there. I think I said mild stress, but that organization is just into the moderate. So they're just at the beginning of moderate. Yeah. So that goes to the leaders. And so now we know, or the organization knows, and can use this as a baseline as well to say, okay, we've done an assessment for our team. We're at a 19.45. What can we do over the course of months or even a year to make improvements? We want to see that score go down. There may be things that we're planning on doing as an organization which might increase stress, restructuring, for example. So we want to get a baseline now. We want to go through our changes and then measure again.
What's the ideal stress level in a company?
Such a great question. What we find is that most organizations actually fall into the high end of normal. What I like about this particular assessment is it acknowledges that some stress is okay. And this is a lot of the work we do with individual employees as well. We, as human beings, we need a certain amount of stress. It sounds a bit silly to say we need a certain amount of stress, but there are some really positive aspects of stress. When we think about when we're really sort of in flow at work, where time seems to sort of slow down and our mental acuity is very sharp, so it's like presentations like this, for example, where our stress might be a little bit elevated, but hopefully it gives us a bit more mental acuity and sharpness. These are good things. This is the positive benefits of stress. So to answer your question, a lot of the organizations that we work with tend to come in at normal or even high to the high end of normal, but the spread is distressing. We experience there's some employees who are in that extremely severe, quite a few in severe, and a lot into moderate. And this is where both personal health problems can happen and absolutely will have an impact on the business, for sure. What we want to do is acknowledge where we are with our organizational stress, put in place things to keep that group into the normal or to the mild or the moderate, but also work on the extremely severe and severe and try and bring them down. And we should see this come down in terms of the organizational stress score, but also the spread as well.
Have you worked with a company that has had extremely severe stress? And what is your 911 to the leaders?
Yeah. So yes, this is the distressing. This brings up a couple of things. One is organizations may feel we don't want to know. We're better not to know. And my challenge to that is that it's happening. You've got people in your organization who are, in this case, in extremely severe stress condition. Absolutely, it's showing up in your workplace for sure, but it'll also show up in increased stress leaves, short-term, long-term leaves, as well as people quitting. And this is what I experience even in my private practice, people who are on the edge. They can't tolerate it anymore. So knowing is really important. Then you have an opportunity to actually do something. And that's back to that opportunity again. There are things that organizations can do, like, for example, stress. There's workplace factors that contribute to employee stress. One of them, for example, is ambiguous reporting structure. There's a direct connection with the ambiguous reporting structure and stress. And so an organization can very simply audit their small department or larger organization and determine, is the reporting structure as clear as we think it is on the org chart?
Right.
Here it is. But what are employees actually experiencing? Who are they answering to? How are they managing their workload? If they've got multiple people asking them to do tasks. So that's, I want to say simple. I mean, it's not very, always simple, but it's one area, for example, that contributes to employee stress. Workload, another one. Even loneliness can impact stress. So we'd want to do a sort of a loneliness audit to see what percentage of our folks are feeling isolated and lonely, and what can we do to improve that.
I think in those extremely severe stress, I would think that the leaders would want to take immediate action, but you're saying that they don't.
Well, they can now that they've got the data. Yeah, we also do with employees. So when an employee engages with the survey and they get the result, we don't just say, okay, here's your number, moderate stress or severely stressed. We're from a therapeutic point of view, we're very careful and mindful to walk the employee through based on the results. So they can walk through what the results mean. How might stress be showing up for them? What we've found directly from employees when we were doing sort of some of our beta testing and pilots is that employees felt validated, that what they were feeling actually has a name or a number to it. It's like, yeah, that's why I'm not sleeping at night, or that's why I'm more irritable. Right. They also felt, interestingly enough, that their company cared more for them just by asking. Without the company actually doing anything, just by asking, they felt my company cares more for me. So we don't leave the employee there. There's also an opportunity for employees to engage with stress support and even curriculum. So if they want to better understand their relationship with stress or make improvements, they will walk through self-guided, self-paced curriculum on understanding and lowering their own stress. So that's that really employee component. What can they do?
Sure. So it's all about asking the right questions to get to the employee. And that's the whole theme of this conversation, right? So
Absolutely.
I have a sample of the stress survey here. And can you walk me through what the employee experience is? So this is the sample survey, but they get in, I mean, are they nervous that their data is being used? Or tell us how that experience works.
Yeah. So you're right. This is one question. I think we have 15 questions, I think, for a full validated assessment for stress. And this is question 11. We sort of randomly picked it. But the employee will get a URL that is, that they can go on from any device. There's no login. There's no username. They just go onto the URL and complete this survey and then click submit. The nice thing is, of course, that it's completely anonymous. The challenge is there's nowhere that you can't save it. That was a decision we made, that rather than set up a username and account so that you can have a dashboard to sort of keep the results, we felt we wanted to make sure that all employees engaged in it felt safe to engage in it, that there's no connection to them. And so the downside is there's no place to store this for them. But we walk them through that and say, if you want to print it, for example, you can print it. You can take it to your GP as well, or your support network, your coach, your therapist, and say, this is my validated stress score. So this is one question. And this one talks about tolerating interruptions. And this is as simple as it is. And then I think we have also the results of this one as well.
Oops,
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah. So this is what your organization would see. The results of the one question, which was how you can tolerate interruptions. So it's not saying, are you stressed or not stressed, or how stressed do you feel? This is how stress shows up in the workplace. Tolerating interruptions. This is how we interact with our colleagues. This is how our colleagues interact with their managers. If they feel they have a low tolerance for interruptions, that has an impact on their relationships. They can start self-isolating. To protect themselves from interruptions, they will start turning devices off or not coming to the office if they've got some options there. They can often see when they are interrupted, they'll have low patience for interruptions, and they can often be seen as short or curt or even rude by their colleagues. Colleagues may be less inclined to ask them for help because their experience is that the employee doesn't tolerate interruptions well. Managers may be less inclined to ask employees to participate in projects. Promotion can be impacted. What's interesting is that employees can often have negative feelings about how they acted and reacted to someone in the workplace because they're feeling stressed. So you end up with a stressed employee who has bad feelings about themselves for the way they're behaving or behaved. Yeah, this is where I think it gets really interesting. It's one thing to say we've got stress, but in this case, question 11 talks about tolerating interruptions. This hopefully says to organizations, oh, this is what's happening. This is why people are, or this individual is behaving the way they are. When we have extremely stressed or moderately stressed individuals, absolutely, there's less tolerating for interruptions, less patience as well. Patience is another question we ask too. In this case,
Yes.
this one is like 15%. Most of the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
flipping through these.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good one. One of the things it can tell you the why behind the stress. And I think that is so important for people to understand that. Whereas other surveys don't get to that. And this is really understanding the why. And to me, that is one of the biggest things in surveys is getting to the why. And that's why when you showed me this, I was so intrigued by it, because we know how to deal with things. If we need to set up office hours, we need to set up, various guardrails to make something a little bit, somebody to not have as many interruptions or what have you, and I know for me personally, the interruption of my phone annoys me, right? And it stresses me when I have people texting me when I'm trying to concentrate, kids, coworkers, what have you. I don't mean to be short with them, but I'm just trying to get something else done. So it can teach you how to manage your own time, but also if you're a manager, to manage other people's time, to help manage their time. That's why I really like this. So kudos to you, Paul, for doing it this way.
How did we get here and what do we do?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, right on. Technology is a very big piece of it in my mind, is how simple how quickly we can connect with one another. I mean, think about back in the day when you'd have to walk down, make an appointment, walk down to somebody's office, have a conversation with them. I mean, it was just a little bit more of a less stressful situation. Okay, so let's talk about the benefits of really asking the right questions. Can you talk to this slide for me, please?
Yeah, and these are great numbers. This came out of Gallup's, actually just recently came out about a week ago, Gallup's report. We can find numbers honestly anywhere. These are just happen to be very, very current. Yeah, so why invest in your employees' mental health? Well, numbers can help us answer that. When we look at absenteeism, turnover, safety incidents, accidents, there's a great one. Even just looking at stress, for example, when one of the questions I mentioned before is on patience. If we have a high number of staff who are impatient most of the time. That decreases focus and can increase accidents. When we're impatient, moving too quickly through things, we can have physical accidents, but it also means we can miss opportunities as well. I mean, if we're rushing through things, yeah, we'll miss out on things. So, I mean, I like the safety incidents and accidents, but anyhow, stress effects certainly can affect that and productivity.
So one of the things that I am so fascinated to see, my background is in workplace well-being. I worked for the Association for Fitness and Business right after university, and this stuff was being studied. I still have all the documentation of all of the different studies that we did and things like that. But this is showing the numbers are very similar, right? If you have high employee well-being, you're seeing a lot of positive benefits from it all. And it's so funny to me, because I've been such an advocate for this throughout my entire career, how it's taken so long for leaders to understand it. And I think it's really says something about the evolution of employees expressing their own opinions, and you're giving them the avenue to do that, which I think is fabulous. It might be anonymous, but at the same time, we've not really had a tool out there like this, in my opinion, to really share that and show that they're stressed. So kudos to you, Paul. It's taken several years. I'm not fresh out of university. Let's put it that way. Okay, so let me ask you about all the different surveys. So stress. Talk to me about the different surveys.
We like starting with stress with organizations because it's accessible, feels accessible. Everyone talks about stress. People are okay sharing about their stress, and some folks wear it as a badge of honor, maybe did more recently than now. So stress is a really great starter. The other ones that are important, or the ones that I have actually the most passionate about right now, is on loneliness and isolation. Lots of really rich data that's coming out that shares, the effect of remote work or hybrid work on loneliness. And it's such an individual experience, loneliness. Where am I getting my social connection from? How much do I need it from the workplace? And in the past, it's sort of been a blanket. I shouldn't say a blanket. We just need to measure it. We just need to know what percentage of our folks are suffering from loneliness, so we know exactly, do we have a problem and where is it? Worry is a great one. We all sort of can tend to worry, but worry can lead to anxiety, actually. Sort of thinking about the future, worrying about the future a lot can lead to stress and anxiety. So worry is a nice one, and anxiety itself is a good one. Burnout, a helpful one as well. And we're also developing psychological health and safety. So the developing we're doing around that is more on the global, certainly the North American approach to psychological health and safety, sort of merging the different agencies. Surgeon General, for example, we've got one in Canada as well, really merging those to say, well, can we get a score for this? Can we get a baseline? And all of that said, it's just starting. If we start with stress, we get a baseline, and then we can implement either our own tools at work, or you can work with us or other organizations that can help improve employee well-being and stress, and then you can measure it again.
Fabulous. And I love this report out, because this is part of your report out, right, to the leadership.
Yeah.
So it goes to the individual and it goes to the leaders. And so the leaders can take action, but it creates awareness for the employees. Like, holy cow, I didn't realize I was so stressed. I mean, a lot of us just bottle it up and swallow it and compartmentalize and just don't think it pertains to me until somebody asks that question. And then you're like,
right on.
Oh, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. You think, oh,
somebody asking the question. I'm so happy somebody's asking the question, because it could keep the lid down, right, or lid closed.
Totally. Yeah, that's that validation part of it, where employees feel heard, they understand. Not all folks have ever done a stress assessment, but it's the same as going to our doctor and getting sort of our blood pressure checked once in a while, or whatever blood work we do, whatever we do to sort of keep ourselves in check and healthy. This is a great way to say, how are we doing with stress, as an example, And to your point, yeah, this is sort of an amalgamation of some slides that come in our report. Our report is actually 30 pages. It's a bit of a big read, and so we actually have a sort of a condensed executive summary of it as well. But it's really detailed. It really shows how your employees are showing up for stress, how that stress affects the business, how it affects their behavior, how it affects the business, and then what can you do as an organization to lower stress, and what can employees can do on their part to lower their own stress. And then we, retest. to see how we're doing, see if it's making
Sure.
improvements. Yeah.
So when is that retest? Like, is there a predictive time to retest, or is it just based on what the situation is?
Yeah, I think 6 months seems to be reasonable,
Okay.
but also depends on what the organization is doing or going through, even global situations too. So if there's restructuring happening, it's nice to get a baseline before and then sort of get a baseline after. We just want to make sure that what we're doing in between the surveys, we're actually doing some work. That we're
Right.
actually making some changes, and it takes time. We didn't get here overnight, and it'll take us some time to level out and lower.
Yeah, totally. Let me ask you
Mm.
this, Paul. HR folks are wonderful. They have a special place in my heart because they take good care of us, right? But are HR people feeling like this is not needed in their organization, or is it, I mean, I'm sure it's all over the board. I always find when I was working back in the day, not in my current role, but back in the day working with HR folks, they're like, oh, we've got that covered, right?
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
is a new model. This is a new way of thinking. How is how have they been digesting this? Is it something that they're willing to shift from the traditional HR models?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we talk with organizations who aren't surveying at all in any way,
Oh, wow.
to organizations that are very, very robust in their surveying. The recent company we worked with the VP of HR and culture, and they're very robust in their pulse surveys. So we integrated this survey sort of at the right time for them when they were sort of in their sort of pulse in their survey cycle, and they just love the data. They
Yeah,
just wanted to know, we think we're doing a great job, and so how great a job are we doing?
sure.
And then let's continue with the great work we're doing and then retest, remeasure.
No, I was saying that's fabulous. I think it's really
Yeah.
important to plan the timing.
Yeah, it's, this is a voluntary survey, so we want to have, good engagement. And one of the things that we'll do when we work with a client is offer or help them with pre-survey engagement questions. So it's, just sort of saying, why would this be important to do? That this is for you, not for the organization. I mean, the organization will enjoy or, appreciate getting the data, but it's really about you as an employee to check in with how you are doing. And so some of our communications can be around that, depending on how the organization communicates with their staff. We'll help with that pre-survey communication, just so people understand, where this is coming from. Why would it be helpful
Sure.
to do it? And we also believe in transparency. We invite organizations to share the results back with their organization too, to say, look, this is how we're doing as an organization, and this is what we're planning on doing to make changes. That's
Sure.
voluntary for the organization, but we think it's important.
I can think of so many different practical applications in the roles that I've played over the years. And one that's coming really front and center for me is I used to work for an acquisition-based company, and I planned their events when they purchased companies and they would merge companies. And it was just super. The acquisition of itself was very stressful for all the legal team, the financial team, or yeah, the finance team, all of the different teams. And then my job was to roll out the new look and feel of it all, right, at an event.
Mhm.
I think it would be so interesting to see a quick stress level at various times in that acquisition or that stress time. Could you do it so you're talking to the legal team when they're going through? Could it be done like that? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, the organization can decide what group they want to survey. The only condition would be that the group is large enough to maintain anonymity,
Sure.
to
And how
maintain
many,
anonymity.
what would
Yeah,
that size be?
well, here's the thing is if it's lower than a threshold, there's no sort of set number, but if it's a low number, and what we've said to some organizations is we'll engage with your team, but we'll may not report all the data back. So if we only get one person, so if you've got a team of 10 and only one person
Right.
responds, then we will say to the organizations, this is not something we're going to share with you. It's just not, it wouldn't be reasonable, to have sort of low engagement and then sort of make these decisions about how we are as an organization for stress if we're not getting the right amount of data in terms of
And
numbers and percentages. Yeah,
how do they react to that?
it's understandable. We don't
Sure.
what we wouldn't want is for a survey to come back and zero stress or low stress when in fact the majority of the team is actually quite stressed. Yeah.
They might not have answered the question or a survey because they're too stressed.
Yeah, that's right. Loneliness is another one around that space too. Like, it's really important to get high engagement so we can help as many as possible. And that's why, I think we start with stress, and we can move into other areas too that can often feel a bit more personal. But then we
Sure.
gain some trust. Employees can see how it's being used and why it might be helpful. You're talking about, say, mergers and acquisitions or measuring prior to an event. I have a dream. Mental health scores become part of your line items in your P&Ls, so that leaders know the higher our stress score or the higher our mental health score is, that's going to have a direct impact on the bottom line. So we make strategic decisions knowing that it might have an impact on mental health, and we start planning around it. Mergers and acquisitions is a great example. That we need to have a score. We go through the best to mitigate poor mental health outcome after we do the merger or the acquisition, and then we measure it again. And we actually could even have KPIs to say this is where we want to be as an organization. We want to be in that, say, in stress, one of that normal stress category, because we know it's going to have a positive impact on our business. And that should be public. In fact, some of the Gallup numbers that came out, that a large number of CEOs shared that they think mental health wellness should be measured and shared publicly. And this can be helpful even for recruitment.
I love that. In my world, for Merits, I am responsible for the climate and impact report of our company. And so I have all of the numbers from, and that's this document that I shared earlier, the numbers for our environmental impact and our DEAI strategy with accessibility and diversity, equity, inclusion. And so why not add that workplace well-being number in there? I mean, that you've got, I think that's a really good aspiration. I think it'll take a bit to get people there, but I agree with you. I think that that's something that would be really helpful to organizations. But what we're experiencing from the climate and impact report is even investors, and this is what happens in the public world, they look at the sustainability, climate and impact, that's just what we choose to call it, but ESG report or sustainability report for publicly held companies. It is a requirement to have those reports nowadays. And so for publicly held companies, in fact, that is regulations that are coming online for all of that. But the point I'm trying to make is just add that well-being piece of it, because I think what is happening for a lot of investors, and like you mentioned earlier, people looking at the organization to see if they want to go work for them is really important, that they're leaning into environmental, social, and governance strategies. How about put a W on there? ESGW.
Yeah.
That would be really cool for me. I think that you're onto something there, Paul. I want to ask you a couple more questions. So looking ahead, what are your aspirations for Q2 Wellness? I know you just talked about that, but like 5 months from now, what do you want to do? Do you want to focus on all of those, or do you want to focus mostly on stress? Where do you see that going for you?
Yeah, in some ways some ways we follow a trend. In some ways, we're following just the idea that we can talk about mental health, we can measure mental health. Stress is accessible, it's a good start. Loneliness feel odd using the word trending, but there's a lot of conversations around employee isolation and loneliness as it related to sort of post-pandemic and the way it sort of shifted our work. So we're happy to follow that. We're happy to say, look, as organizations are recognizing the importance or the impact that their decisions have on their employees, and in this case, loneliness, we need some feedback. We need some data now. We've made a decision about where our employees are going to work. How is that impacting loneliness? And so that's where we can, quite quickly and easily follow in that sense. Ultimately, our vision would be to have one mental health survey that addresses all of these things, all the key areas, and then allow organizations to have their mental health score. So they have a benchmark they can work for year over year.
That would be great.
Yeah, and then that could even be indexed, that we could see how does your organization compare to other organizations in your industry. So you can see, ultimately, however we get to a place where organizations are recognizing the value of knowing how their employees are doing with their wellness and mental health is kind of the goal. We think organizations respond well to metrics, to data, true and validated data, and so that they can really put their ROI to the test. Let's invest into mental health and let's sort of see if it makes a difference. Yeah, we know that we can see the negative effects of mental health through turnover. But for us, that's too late. Once an employee is
Right.
no longer engaged and has left the company, that data we can't. So what we want to do is we come in a bit earlier than that. We want to sort of find out how our folks are doing so we can make decisions to keep them engaged and keep them well.
And that's exactly one of the issues that has been top of mind since I started this journey is, everybody's like, what's the ROI on all of this, right? You're cracking that nut, in my opinion. And I think that's amazing because it's taken a lot of those questions and really made it a little bit more simple. So kudos to you, Paul. I think I'm glad that you have that vision for the future while you're going through with what you're doing now, because I think that that's where, in my opinion, we really need to get to how is this making a difference in our investment into this type of stuff. Investing in people, in my world, our people are the most important part of our business. And I know a lot of companies are like that, and we really need to make certain that we take good care of our employees, and that's one of our values, is taking good care of each other. And so it really shows up when you're in fun ways, when you're doing great, but what is that when you're not doing so great? And this can really, really help you figure that out. So
I appreciate that. One thing, maybe Rachel, I'll just add, and maybe I've mentioned this before, is that, what we care about, or what organizations have the opportunity to care about, is how their employees are doing inside and outside of work. Like, we're interested in how you're doing. That's what's important.
A business is not going to keep going if they're burning everybody out and people are leaving. It's going to grow if you keep the people and you bring in new people and you just keep growing, and that makes such a difference in people's lives daily.
Yeah, for sure. And then my business hat on, it always shows up on the bottom line. I mean, let's put it to test, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what I
Absolutely.
like about what you're doing, and is because you have that business mindset too. Well, we have 5 minutes left, it looks like. We have a couple of people. Are there any questions that we'd like to talk about? Or we could end it on a fun fact, which I love fun facts personally. So Paul, can you share it with us, your fun fact?
Oh gosh, that's a picture from a long time ago. So that was taken when I was training in Broadway in New York for the theater, Broadway theater. I can feel my face going a bit red. Yeah, I trained in Broadway theater in New York, and that's me on the other side of that.
Tell us a little bit
And
about that story. What
I
did
mean,
you
it was an
train?
amazing.
How did you train?
Yeah, so it was in a theater in New York, Circle in the Square, if anyone's familiar with that institution in New York City. And it was, Broadway theater. And I came back out of that, and I was a professional actor for a little while.
He's in commercials too.
Yeah, commercials, theater. In fact, I'm looking at my theater posters up there. So I did that, studied Shakespeare in London, and it was a really great period, and still has a role for me, just the arts and creativity and sort of insights. But yeah, that's a fun fact.
It's awesome. I love that fun fact. Well, it's really interesting because you have taken acting and being in tune with your audience and really applied it to your work world, and are really doing that and understanding the audience in which you're engaging with is a piece in an actor's role that they really have to understand. And you've taken it into business and really trying to understand the employees. So I'm super proud to call you my friend, because I think you're a very smart human. And I know everybody likes the gift of time. And since we've touched on all of our questions, I'm going to give 4 minutes back to everybody in this webinar. So Sylvia, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Rachel and Paul, for this talk. I just want to remind everyone that all of the sessions for our summit are being recorded, and you'll be able to find it on the Global Wellness Institute's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So thank you again for joining. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.